Hey, it's time to watch another Lauren video. Yay. I went to try and find a video of hers that I saw posted on Twitter, and I couldn't find it. I don't know if it got taken down or what, but it was a dog shit video. It obviously was not something that I would care enough about that I would commit the title to memory because, let's be honest, nothing of her content even remotely comes close to having any sort of actual value. But it was easy to pick on. But in this one, she's apparently talking to Sean here, and Sean is an interesting person. I will not tell you the name of his channel, although she probably will. But yeah, he's pretty terrible. Anyway, here we go. This is Out of Control: How Leftists Enable Crime.
Hey, Lauren here. Let's talk about the left's failures when it comes to crime.
Okay.
If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that I just overall think leftist policies are garbage. They're garbage when it comes to economics. They're garbage when it comes to just social issues and policies. But
you know what's funny? You say that our economics, the left's economics, are garbage, but just today, we got a jobs report that came out. And the U.S. just added another 223,000 jobs, and the unemployment rate is now 3.5%. That is a 50-plus year low. I mean, you can say that you think it's garbage, but you can't really say it's not effective, or at least not today. Oh, well.
But they are especially not only trash, but also dangerous when it comes to crime. And I want to start off by saying that, yes, things like compassion and mercy, they are important virtues. And I also think that there is plenty of room
Wait. Compassion is an important virtue, and that's why you spend most of your channel shitting all over people because they make TikToks that you think are icky and cringy. Come on. Like, this is not helping that trope of, you know, the saying Christians will try and express compassion and love, but then they act like jerks, which I know most Christians don't do that, but the ones that are the loudest tend to do that. You're really not helping that stereotype, Lauren.
Criticize the criminal justice system in America without being a leftist or being a crazy ideologue. There are many legitimate problems within the criminal justice system and just the prison system that should be discussed and should be addressed.
Okay.
With that in mind, I think it's also fair to say that compassion and mercy, when taken too far, are actually no longer virtuous, but they can become vices. Additionally, as many problems as the criminal justice system currently has, there are still suggestions out there to change them that are not just as bad, but they're worse. They make things just so much worse than they currently are, not only for criminals or felons themselves, but also just for society at large. You see.
All right, so let's talk about leftist ideology when it comes to crime. This is a spectrum that we can discuss, okay? What should be the base level is to readdress how we deal with nonviolent drug offenses. Personally speaking, I don't think you should be ever imprisoned for putting a substance in your body. It's your body. It's your own sovereign territory, But at the same time, the prison industrial complex wants drugs to be illegal and wants people to be imprisoned for it. It's cheap labor. In some cases, effectively slave labor. That is a leftist position. You can go even further into prison abolition, where prison abolition isn't what it actually sounds like much with most of these goddamn words. It's not to abolish prisons outright. It's to tear down the notion of private prisons, which is a good idea, because the idea of making money as a private entity off of the backs and labor of other human beings against their will is kind of fucked up, like real bad, but also to restructure and reform the way prisons even work into not prisons, but actually rehabilitative centers, and very specifically addressed per the crime and how it impacts society. Simple as that. These are totally fine to talk about and to debate. What isn't really up for debate is things that you can demonstrably prove. Things like legalization of marijuana is not a harmful thing to society. It has been a benefit to society. It just is what it is.
Under total leftist control, once great cities like New York and San Francisco, they've essentially become unlivable. Okay, residents have to deal.
New York City's crime rate is down. San Francisco's crime rate is actually down, despite the fact that it's pretty gross. I mean, I've been to San Francisco. A lot of San Francisco is gorgeous. Parts of San Francisco are really bad, But the rate of the crime has actually been going down for most offenses and things like that. But that's not the line that she's going to sell. She's going to sell that liberal cities are shitholes. Not paying attention to the fact that if you go by per capita, red states overwhelmingly have worse crime rates than blue states. She's not going to tell you that because that's not the line. That's not the rhetoric. Oh well.
Deal with drug addicts littering the streets with needles. They have to deal with assaults that go unpunished. Criminals being let back on the street hours after being arrested, if they are ever arrested at all. And the reason
she's framing this like this is something new and not something that has been repeated ad nauseum for decades. Like, there's nothing new about this. Like, this is shit that people have been complaining about all the goddamn time. Failures in the justice system? Absolutely. But to try and water it down from, like, systemic failures, especially, like, ones that can be regionally attributed to simply red versus blue, is how a baby thinks about, like, deep, serious, complicated political issues. This is baby brain shit.
Why this has happened is that there is a prevailing leftist narrative that the
per capita red states have smaller populations skewing the numbers. That is literally why you talk about per capita, is because you're trying to talk about a crime rate, not instances of crime, but crime rate. That's what it's about. That's the whole point. Obviously, if you have more people, you will probably have more crime because there are more people. So you do it per capita, and when you do per capita, you find that red states are more violent. And here's the other thing too. They usually live far apart. They usually have much bigger gaps in their population centers, yet somehow, per capita, they're more violent. That's weird. That's super weird.
The real problem with the criminal justice system, you see, isn't that criminals aren't prosecuted or punished the right way. It's basically that they're prosecuted or punished at all. Because in the minds of many leftists, as today's guest often likes to say, all these criminals, well, they're actually just secretly Aladdin. Yeah, they're all Aladdin and they're only stealing to feed their starving families, even though a lot of the crimes that go unpunished have nothing to do with feeding starving families and often just revolve around, I don't know, assaulting random Asian people in the streets. So here today.
Interesting. Okay. Now, we're gonna play a game, and I'm gonna prime you on this because I'm very familiar with her guest and who he is an acolyte of, and what their favorite thing to talk about is. I just want you to, when you're listening to these arguments, yes, very oddly specific. I know. When you're listening to these arguments, just wonder if there's something that they're not saying out loud, but you feel like they're trying to talk about, okay? That's all I'm going to prime you for. Just, is there like a word or a certain descriptor that they're just not gonna say? Or maybe they'll surprise me and actually grow some balls and fucking say it.
To discuss this with us is Sean, the one and the only actual justice warrior. If you're not already subscribed to his channel, I mean, what have you been doing with your life? I've shouted him out in my videos several times. Not only is he a nice guy, Liam and I have had the pleasure of hanging out with him and his fiancée Skyla a couple of times, and they're just awesome people.
Sounds hot. Did you guys have a good hot tub party? Brrr. Just kidding. Lauren is very boring.
But he also does some of the best debunking I have ever seen when it comes to a lot of the Black Lives Matter martyrs that the left likes to hold up, or just reports on crime in general. Before we get to him, though, I do want to say a big thank you to today's sponsor.
Fuck off. No free sponsorship. Reads on my shit.
Hey, Sean, it's good.
Okay. They're at a Turning Point USA event. Fantastic. Fan-fucking-tastic. Also, how short is Sean? Lauren is like 5'2", 5'3". Oh, buddy. Not that I give a shit. Like, all the love to my short kings and whatnot, but I'm struck by that. I just didn't realize. That's very interesting. Turning Point USA is basically like, it's a grooming organization. It is overtly a fucking grooming organization to try and recruit young dudes, specifically, from high school and college into conservative ideology. They're literally at a groomer event. This is so wild. Holy shit.
Good to see you again. Always a
Good
pleasure.
to see you.
So as people can tell, I'm clearly essentially the same height as you are, and no one can look into what shoes we are wearing at all.
True.
Yeah, so you do so much awesome work.
Okay, maybe she's wearing super tall shoes. Maybe he's pretty normal size. He might be my height, you know.
Talking about things like criminal justice, exposing
I'm not tall enough to throw that stone. I'm not throwing any stones. I was shocked by it. Like, yeah, maybe she's just wearing really, really tall shoes. That must be what it was.
the narratives that have been, I guess, woven around different crime cases, especially when it comes to BLM. So, I mean, what do you think are some of the biggest issues that are increasing crime right now? I'm 100% putting you on the spot, but there are so many different leftist cities where we see this increase in crime happening. A lot of people will say, oh, well, it's just poverty. Oh, it's just that we don't have enough bail reform.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting one. Why is it so hard for the conservative brain to consider that crime is a reaction of condition? Why? And the thing is, if you don't believe that crime can be further compelled by material conditions, you know, like being poor or being raised in an unsupportive family or being raised with substandard food, environment to live in, education, all these types of things. If you don't think that those are the things that can contribute to crime, then why do you think people do crime? Like, why? Just like if you took a person in a total vacuum and just allowed them to do crime or not do crime, what would compel them to do the crime? Like, I'm always so curious about that. You know, it's so weird.
What do you say to that?
I would say it's different depending on which part of the country, but overall, we have
good
a
answer.
soft on crime attitude that's growing more prominent in the United States. And the thing is like
I wonder what that means. I mean, if it's on drug offenses, then I think that's good. But on other stuff, maybe not.
might live in a city where they only made one or two changes, but like your police department might not be as sophisticated as another one where they would have to change 3 or 4 things in order to mess it up. So it's not one.
I don't know, save for 2 cities, I don't know of any city that defunded the police. Like there's this rhetoric that goes around right now in conservative talk radio here in Oregon about how Portland's a shithole because they defunded the police. Portland's police were better funded this last year than they ever have been. At no point were they ever defunded, but that's not what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you it's because of the defund the police, blah, 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 even though that never fucking happened.
Policy, but it's the fact that we're tearing down barriers.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm so fascinated that you decided to use that language in my chat. Why do you think subhuman mongrels on the streets of New York assault old ladies? Economics, what the fuck? Unironically, yes. Unironically, yes. Material conditions, not just economics, though. But economics are at the backbone of all of these different types of systemic fucking problems. You take somebody who comes from a traditionally broken-ass home, a home that's probably broken from various different kinds of things, the prison industrial complex, the fact that people are poor, the fact that people are hungry, their lives fucking suck, they live in squalor, things are shit, they try and find ways in which they can survive the streets. They find ways in which they can band about camaraderie. There might be an inherent bitterness bred from their material conditions that continue to inform them to be worse and worse and more fucking terrible. And then you are then breeding a culture by which these types of things are very normal. Now you can say, well, the culture's the problem. Well, where the fuck did the culture come from? It didn't just manifest itself out of fucking nowhere. It's not like there's an etheric field out there, some free-floating fucking miasma that just arbitrarily says, hey, you will do crime. You know, you will be poor. Your life will be shit. Like, it's so fucking crazy. It's a huge, complicated conglomeration of material conditions that lead people into societally destructive behavior. And it's a reaction. The difference between that and overtly oppressive, pre-planned and organized groups that inherently try to destroy people's compassion and compel them into shitty ideologies, things like, I don't know, a grooming organization like Turning Point USA. Genes? No. There is no warrior gene. There is no violence gene. That's no, absolutely not. Also, if you don't want people to worry that you're talking about race, maybe avoid a word like mongrel. Because anybody who is if you're listening to somebody who's a YouTuber and they unironically use the term mongrel, they are saying something that they are not outwardly saying, but they're saying it.
That were put up in the 90s that help reduce crime nationwide in this country.
So when you talk about those barriers, a lot of people might say, things like cash bail. It actually is just awful because you have people who are poor, who didn't do anything, just want to feed their starving families. But now, if that even, now they're being locked away without fair trial.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are different anecdotes that people have brought up where we see someone has been held. They didn't actually do anything wrong, but they didn't have bail, so they spent a lot of time behind bars. What do you say to those individuals' cases where that has happened?
Well, I want to know this because cash bail in general is a really fucked up and complicated situation. And Sean, as much as I dislike Sean, and as much as I think Sean is very dishonest in some ways, Sean has at least a deeper conception of these topics than somebody like Lauren. Lauren has the complexity of a fucking rain puddle full of dog shit, okay? Sean at least can say something somewhat informed.
What I would say is cash bail is a bit of a canard because it's not about changing the bail amount or whatever. I'm fine with reducing the amount of financial penalty you're assessing to somebody so that you're not holding people on BS crimes that can't afford to get out of jail. But what they sneak into every one of these bail reform laws is the fact that you're guaranteeing automatic release without an assessment of their past criminal history. So in New York,
I don't know if that's necessarily true. That might be accurate and true in isolated incidences. I would have to see data on it. Maybe he's put in the effort, maybe he hasn't, but that's kind of very dismissive. I think we can talk about the concept in and of itself without just simply dismissing it with but then they do this. That doesn't really talk about it, though.
it doesn't matter if you're charging somebody $500 or $10.
Here's a good one. You can't explain away criminality by society's fault. To some extent, people have self-decision. Correct. That's correct. But that's the part that, you have to automatically tack on when you're talking about these types of things. When we discuss things that are systemic, material conditions that lead people towards bad decisions, that does not, and it never has, and it never will, excuse the crime. So anytime that you start to think that if you're hearing somebody talk about material conditions and you're getting this feeling that somebody's trying to excuse the crime, stop. Nobody's saying that. Everybody is responsible for their own actions. However, to point out that it's just their decision ultimately removes the most important aspect. We want to compel people to not do crime. If you remove away the fact that influences can push people towards crime, Like you have to, if you want people to do less crime, you can't just be like, well, they just did a crime. It's their fault. Oh well, and not look at it any further, because then you're not going to help how much crime happens. It's not going to go down. It might go up because nothing is done to rectify the issue. That's the part that really fucks me up on this kind of thing. With all these arguments that I constantly have, you have to go after the cause. Thank you, Argonian. Yes, you have to go after the cause, not the symptom. Symptom still has to be addressed. Still have to met out some type of societal standards. If that's punishment, that's punishment. If that's some type of rehabilitation, that's rehabilitation. But you have to actually address why this shit happens in a systemic way. It's not going to remove all crime, but at the very worst, people suffer less, and at the very best, crime goes down. Argue against that. Like, argue against that. Like, I don't even understand how there could be an argument against that. It makes so much sense.
10,000 or whatever, because they got rid of the fact that they got rid of the ability of judges to let people or to hold people pre-trial based on the fact that they're a significant threat. So we had a guy who sucker punched somebody in the street, and this guy ended up having to have emergency brain surgery. Now, the person who did the sucker punching was on parole for life because he had previously pointed a gun at a minor and forced her to do sex acts on him.
I wonder if Sean got this upset when those cops during this protest a couple years back shoved a fucking old man and he cracked the back of his head open on the steps. I mean, we can talk about anecdotes, dude. We can talk about anecdotes as much as you want. There was this one guy. He was a piece of shit and he did a piece of shit thing. Really? Fuck, man. I've got a bunch of those that are cops. Do you want to talk about the cops? And I bet you, if you look up what he's talking about, I bet that there's how do I want to say this? I bet that there's a specific thing about that perpetrator that will be very significant to all the other anecdotes that Sean will talk about or that Sean covers on his channel.
So, according to the new reforms that we passed, which are bail reform, raise the age, and less is more, his parole wasn't violated. You couldn't look at his previous criminal history to determine whether or not he was dangerous enough to hold in jail. So he got out of jail before this guy got out of the hospital. And again, they had to open his skull due to the pressure from the injury that he suffered.
Yeah, that sucks. That's terrible. That dude should be punished. Absolutely. Everybody's in agreement. Okay. It was a failure of the justice system. Agreed. Okay.
That's crazy to me. And it doesn't matter the amount of money you set for bail, the judge should be allowed to remand this person based on the fact that he has poor character, propensity to reoffend, whatever you want to call it.
Now, a lot of people who might be watching this will also likely be concerned about crime, just because I know who my audience is. Do you have any advice?
It goes through a phase, at least like once a year, we have to have a tough on crime mode, you know? The moment anything is going well with the Democrat Party, the right's going to pull out how everything is like dangerous and crime is terrible and blah, 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 blah.
Advice for them, maybe when they're talking about their more leftist or liberal family members or friends who say, well, we just have to have more compassion. There's not enough compassion in the system. How do we simultaneously, quote, have compassion while also ensuring that, I mean, the cities don't turn into New York?
New York is doing great, by the way. This is so fucking weird because like the perception that they're trying to push on you is that a leftist perspective is we have to have compassion. That's not a leftist perspective. The leftist perspective about compassion only relates to people that specifically are being unfairly jailed, which usually is like nonviolent drug offenses, things like that. Moreover, it's talking about it's the difference between like conservative and not even liberal, because liberals are, but left, right? So conservatives want to tell you that the world is it's a pile of shit, but it inherently is supposed to be good. And it's a pile of shit because of these things that our enemies have done. The left says the world is broken and can be better. And it has always been broken. But it's getting better, and we can make it better. So one argues from these people have ruined something that was awesome, which is a lie. And the other is things are not as good as they could be, and we want them to be that good. It's as simple as that.
Well, I would focus more, if you want to have compassion, I would focus more on the victims and highlight them, because the idea.
Good point. That's a good point.
The idea we need to like have compassion for the offenders and make excuses for them and all that. That all creates an environment that tolerates criminality more.
It's just another excuse to not pay attention to systemic issues that compel people. You're reframing it into we have to have compassion for the people that offend. That's not true. We have to be understanding of why these things happen. And Sean and Lauren both would people rather not pay attention to that. Because the truth is, the conservative position on this is they don't want things to actually get better. Because they offer zero solutions for making them better. All they want to do is be tougher on crime. They don't want to reduce crime, because if they wanted to reduce crime, there are things that you could do. And they don't like those. Because that's the left. You know, it's fucking weird.
We want to raise the consequences for participating in criminal behavior, and those consequences should be raised not only criminally but also socially. So the idea that we're going to be like, oh well, this person stole, but like, you know, they lost their job a few months ago, so maybe they needed to steal. It's like, no, they stole 30 power drills from Home Depot. Like, they're not going to feed their kids power drills.
That's incredibly stupid. That's incredibly fucking dumb. What are you gonna steal some sandwiches from Home Depot, Sean? Are there jugs of milk in Home Depot, Sean? I'm gonna be like, well, then why did they go and steal from the grocery store? I don't fucking know. Who fucking cares? What purpose does any of that shit like matter at all? Do I think anybody's like stealing drills to sell to feed their family? I don't know, and I don't fucking care. The idea of like playing pretend on this sort of thing distracts from the entire issue, and it's a fucking baby brain take. It is a child's fucking argument to focus on this kind of shit. It's so dumb.
Yeah, that's a very, very true point. So as someone who...
For somebody who likes to play with blocks... Sure, Lauren, okay.
Lives in New York. I don't know how you're still doing it. I guess good on you for having the patience to deal with that. What do you have to say to fellow New Yorkers who don't really see any hope in the future? Are you in the same boat with them? Did Zeldin just kind of totally blackpill you? Are you still optimistic for the future?
So I hate symbolic victory. So Zeldin lost. The Legend of Zeldin is not the governor, and that hurts me.
I have no idea who any of this is. I don't fucking know.
However, he did carry a lot of swing districts, not only on the congressional level, but in the state legislature. We're looking at good victories in the city council. And I said, and I told you, impacting those 40% of Queens is a good sign.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm going to hold out hope for New York in the future. I really like the food there. It's amazing. Yes. If you guys aren't subscribed to Actual Justice.
Yeah. Boring. Yeah. All right. So anyway, that was that. It's so fucking dumb, man. Like, even because Sean is not a stupid person. I do have some very stern criticisms of the rhetoric that he likes to talk about when it comes to crime. I'm very surprised that he didn't squeeze in more than just one slightly coded. Good on you, man. But he at least has, to some degree, a clever brain. But again, it's all just to distract away from the whole nature. Sean doesn't want the crime rate to go down. He doesn't. Because, like, this idea that if you get tougher on crime and you increase harsher sentences, immediacy of it, 3-strike laws, none of these things fucking worked. They didn't fucking work. We know this. We've seen it. We have the historical fucking record to see whether or not the conservative position on how to deal with crime, if it works or not. It doesn't. It fucking doesn't. It hasn't. And like these ideas of like just distracting away from trying to improve people's lives to see if it would work, and even if it doesn't work, less people are miserable. Like, it's so fucking dumb, and it's so incredibly like, it's pretty inhuman. But then again, like, I shouldn't really expect that much. After all, Lauren's capacity for thought, for a creative and intelligent spark is the equivalent of two popsicle sticks rubbing together in her hollow fucking skull. Oh boy.